In this video, we're going to look at a shortcut method for factoring trinomials where the leading coefficient is 1. So we're going to be looking at trinomials where you have x squared plus bx plus c. So your a value is 1. You're going to take your notes in your booklet on page 5. And we are just going to start by looking at example 1 here. We're going to do this the long way, and then we're going to look for a pattern. So I'm going to multiply a times c, so negative 60, and I'm going to look for things that multiply to negative 60 and add to my b, which is 4. So 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 10, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, 6 times 10, and that's going to be it. Because I'm multiplying to a negative, I know my signs are going to be one positive and one negative. Since I'm adding to a positive, my larger one's going to be positive. So I'm going to go ahead and make all of my smaller numbers negative, and I'm going to look for the pair that adds to 4, which is going to give me my negative 6 and 10. Okay, going to the box. I'm going to plug in my first and my last terms. Use the 2 that I just picked. Don't forget to put the x on there. And then pull out the greatest common factor of each row and each column, paying attention to your negatives there. Do a quick remultiply. X times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. X times 10 is 10x. And negative 6 times 10 is negative 60. So my answer is x minus 6 and x plus 10. Now what I want you to do is pause and work the other 3 examples, and then we'll look for a pattern here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at these examples with you. So in example 2, I did my multiplying 1 times 3. I want to multiply to 3. There's only one thing that does that. Everything needs to be positive. My answer ends up being y plus 1 times y plus 3. For example 3, I wanted to multiply to a negative 6, add to a negative 1. I used 2 and negative 3. Put it in the box there. And then pulled out the GCF of each row, each column, giving me the answer x plus 2x minus 3. And then finally, for example 4, I was multiplying to 12, adding to negative 8. Pay attention to your signs on that one. Since you're multiplying to a positive, your sign needs to be the same. Since you're adding to a negative, they both need to be negative. So using negative 2 and negative 6, and then pulling out our greatest common factor. All right, let's look at the 4 of these together. And I want you to look for a pattern here. Hopefully what you see is that the 2 numbers that I picked are the 2 numbers that ended up with your variable in your binomial here. So there's my 1 and 3. I used 2 and negative 3, 2 and negative 3. I used negative 2 and negative 6, negative 2 and negative 6. This is always going to happen when your leading coefficient is 1. So what that allows us to do is skip all this work here. Once I pick my 2 numbers, I get to just use them. Again, I want to emphasize it only works when your leading coefficient is 1. So let's write our general case, and then we'll do 2 quick examples because this is a shortcut. It'll make it faster for us. So when your leading coefficient is 1, so when you have x squared plus bx plus c, you're going to find the factors of c that add to b, being careful with your signs. And these are the numbers that will go into each linear factor. Saves us the step of having to do the box and pulling out the GCF. Again, I'm emphasizing here, my leading coefficient has to be 1 in order for this to work. It has to be 1, which it is here. Okay, let's look at example 5. So this time I do 18. My leading coefficient is 1. So I want to multiply to 18 and add to negative 11. So 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Thinking about my signs, I'm multiplying to a positive, so my signs need to be the same. Since I'm adding to a negative, they both need to be negative. And hopefully right there, negative 2 and negative 9 is going to work. Now, I'm going to skip the box. I'm going to go straight to my parentheses. I'm going to put P, and then I'm going to use my negative 2 and my negative 9. So again, when my leading coefficient is 1, I get to skip that box step. Let's look at example 6. So this time, leading coefficient is 1, so I want to multiply to negative 10. I want to add to negative 3. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Thinking about my signs, since I'm multiplying to a negative, my signs have to be different. Since I'm adding to a negative, my larger one has to be negative. So I'm going to use 2 and negative 5, because 2 plus negative 5 is negative 3. And again, I get to skip the box step. It's going to be x plus 2, x minus 5. I'm going to say one more time, I can only do this shortcut method when my leading coefficient is 1. If my leading coefficient is anything other than 1, I have to go through all of the steps of multiplying a times c, finding your factors that add to b, putting it in the box.